There's heroes and there's legends. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die.
It's the Sitting Sportside podcast, exclusively on 1045theteam.com.
Oh, no! Because there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball! No crying!
Welcome into the final Sittin' Sportside podcast preview of a division. And this is a special one. This is going to be a special podcast because at the end of this podcast, I will not only have previewed every single division and every single team in the Major League Baseball, I will give my wild card picks in each league, and I'll give my MVP predictions, Cy Young Award predictions, and my World Series prediction. So a big podcast coming here in the last one, the National League East. I'll try to go as quick as possible, so I'm going to jump right into it. I'm Eric Hanman, Sittin' Sportside Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter and tweet your displeasure and what you think about your teams at EricH1045. All right, let's go. Fifth place team I have in the National League East. Unfortunately, this team has suffered a lot of losses in the last 365 days, and it's not only people that they've lost possibly in free agency or whatnot. It's more serious than that, and that's the Miami Marlins. And they have lost their ace, Jose Fernandez, to unfortunate circumstances. And really that's going to hurt them very, very big time. It really, and it's hard to put it any other way. That's just how it is. So on that somber note, the rest of this team, the rotation, they bring in Edison Volquez and Dan Straley to be on top of that rotation. That can't even begin to replicate what they had in Jose Fernandez, but that's two more solid guys. But I don't necessarily see them as guys who can carry a team to victories. Neither is Tom Kohler, neither is Wei Yin Shen, and neither is Adam Conley or whoever, whether it's Jose Urena getting starts or Justin Nicolino. I just don't see those rotations really. It was very thin past Jose Fernandez, and now it's just very thin across the board. And so that part just really and the ballpark they're in. Stanton has, he can hit home runs anywhere, but he can't stay healthy. Yeah, I'm not sure he's had a whole season where he's been healthy for most of the year. And so that scares me with his offense because it's really not that great. Christian Yelich is pretty good. Great showing with Jim Leland's. Jim Leland and the USA's World Baseball Classic team this year. But other than those two, Stanton and Yelich, Ozuna and D. Gordon are two guys that can hit very well. Echeverria at shortstop, Prado, who might be out to start the season, and Derek Diedrich, Justin Bour, and JT Realmuto, the catcher. I just don't think they're going to be good enough to carry a team. So if that offense isn't good enough to carry it, and the pitching is thin, I just don't see this team replicating its third place success from last season. And they were in the wild card for most of the year. So I don't really see this Marlins team. And Don Mattingly usually does a good job with teams, so he's going to need to do a really, really good job with this team to get them in a position to compete for the wild card. Really, I don't see them. I really just don't see them winning winning this division at all. But if they want to compete for the wild card, they need humans work from a lot of these players, and maybe a breakout star here or there that I am just missing, who's not popping up. Real quick, the bullpen, AJ Ramos and Brad Ziegler are competing for the closing job. Ramos, I believe, will get most of the positions. They have a good bullpen with those two aforementioned players, Kyle Barraclough and David Phelps, Junichi Tozawa. So they have actually a decent bullpen. Bullpen, while it helps you win games, it's not going to single-handedly win you games, but it could get you 2 or 3 more victories that you might not have had if you didn't have a strong bullpen. Just ask the Giants down the stretch last season. A fantasy player to look at for this team, and it's really hard. It's kind of hard to find one, but if you're really thin at catcher, JT Realmuto is actually not a bad guy to target in drafts if you're thin. 2 catcher leagues, he's probably I think he's worth a take. definitely. And then Marcell Ozuna, if he's still, around the board, I think in the 12th, 11th round, it'd be okay to take a shot on him. He'll be hitting on top of that lineup, and hitting in front of Yelich and Stanton isn't really all that bad. They'll still produce some kind of offense there. Let's move on to the 4th place team, and for me, the 4th place team is going to be the Philadelphia Phillies, and I liked this team last year to be possibly a kind of that. Remember how the Cubs came out? I don't want to say came out of nowhere, because everyone, including myself, or at least myself, they knew the Cubs were coming at some point. But it was just that one year they took the big step. Astros did the same thing 2 years ago after not making the playoffs last year. And even the Minnesota Twins, if you remember, the Minnesota Twins also kind of did a similar thing that year, but just didn't make the playoffs. I was expecting the Phillies to do a similar thing. Last season, they just weren't ready for it. And so when I look at this team now, I don't necessarily see any significant improvements in this team. So that doesn't lead me to believe and go back on and say, oh, I believe this team is good. But they have a lot of positives that they haven't been able to bring up yet. And there's some negatives with some of the prospects, like Nick Williams, who had kind of attitude issues down in the minor leagues last year. But they still have J.P. Crawford, who's got to look at for midseason this season for fantasy purposes, a shortstop prospect. Jorge Alfaro, he could be a guy. Remember how Gary Sanchez came up and mashed 2 years ago? A catcher, Kyle Schwarber, came up and mashed. You could possibly get that from Jorge Alfaro this year. I'm not sure. To put those expectations of a Gary Sanchez and a Kyle Schwarber on him is very tough. But if you're looking for a catcher who comes up mid-season and you're that desperate, I would take a flyer on Jorge Alfaro when he does come up for this team. So they have a lot of good young players, including their pitching, who in this rotation, the young pitching, so to speak, really is only exemplified in Eckhoff, Velasquez, and Aaron Nola. So Jared Eckhoff, Vince Velasquez, Aaron Nola, and then you have Jake Thompson, who's probably going to start off the year in the minor leagues. Mark Appel, who will start off the year in the minor leagues. Ben Lively, who will start off the year in the minor leagues. All those, after the last three I mentioned, all will start in the minor leagues and might eventually get a chance to be up in the major league. Zach Eflin, another one who came up and showed flashes, also showed flashes of getting destroyed at certain points. Just check that one of the first games he ever pitched against the Blue Jays. Did not fare all that well. Jeremy Hellickson, solid year last year, and he stayed. He accepted the tender to stay. It was very interesting. They didn't get anything for Hellickson at the trade deadline. They offer him the qualifying offer, and he accepts it, meaning that they have to pay him a really high price by him accepting the qualifying offer. So it seems to me that this Phillies kind of front office did not really handle Jeremy Hellickson thing that very well. Could have traded him at the trade deadline last year for at least something, didn't get anything. Tried to get a draft pick by giving him the qualifying offer. He's like, nah, I'm going to stay, guys. And so they're not really handling Jeremy Hellickson that well. Maybe they'll deal him at this year's deadline and give one of those young players that's the right thing to do, but give one of those young players an opportunity. Get something for Jeremy Hellickson, Phillies, because we know at this point you're probably not going to give him a qualifying offer because you're just too scared he'll take it at the end of the 2017 season, this season. So the rotation is still shaky, but good young players who can go in it. Vince Velasquez, you kind of wonder if they can all be durable enough to last the season, even if they do start the season very well for the team. Offensively, though, there's not much power in this lineup behind Tommy Joseph and Michael Franco. Third baseman Franco and Tommy Joseph, who really showed a lot of power last season in his coming out party, but did not get everyday playing time with Ryan Howard still on the roster. With Howard gone, Joseph will probably get everyday opportunities, and he had 21 home runs and just 300 at-bats, so the dude can really hit for power. The problem is, he was kind of getting, I wouldn't say exclusive, but he was getting a lot of time against lefties. Can he hit those against righties? I'm sure, for sure he can. It's just now the everyday grind, not playing every day. Will that help him or hurt him? That's an interesting thing with Tommy Joseph. When I look at the rest of that outfield, Howie Kendrick, or when I look at the outfield, Howie Kendrick, Odubel Herrera, Michael Saunders, they're just all solid guys across the board. Just nothing that is mind-popping that's going to make this Phillies team a favorite. Bullpen, Jemar Gomez will start out as the closer. But I think Hector Neris will end up getting that eventually. I think he's one of the better back end of the bullpen young guys in the league. So the Phillies, while they're still looking good for the future. When you look at the Yankees, a lot of people are kind of getting high on the Yankees, myself included, being a Yankee fan. But when you get high on the Yankees, there's people that are maybe missing out on what the Phillies might be able to do. And that's because of another team in the division that is starting to make some inroads, who weren't that great last year, and then they'll go to the third place team. I gave you a fantasy player to look at, Jorge Alfaro and J.P. Crawford, 2 guys to look at mid-season. Off the bat, though, Franco could really, really break out this year, and obviously Tommy Joseph, another guy to look at as well. And that team I was mentioning before, though, who kind of made some strides, and that's the Atlanta Braves. And it's not that they made a huge stride with their young players. Sure, they're going to give Dansby Swanson an opportunity this year as an everyday player, but they haven't brought up Sean Newcomb, and they haven't brought up Ozzie Albies. So they still have some young guys to build with themselves, but they make a trade for Matt Kemp, which is, while Kemp isn't that great, he's not. Let me rephrase that. I think he's a great player. That's kind of been overlooked. He came over and he decided, I'm actually going to play. He kind of really didn't have a great attitude in San Diego, so to get him, really just like, okay, you want to take on his contract, okay, we'll take your problem if you take ours. And Hector Olivera was had less of an opportunity, if you will, to get in the major leagues because of his domestic violence charges. Matt Kemp was a better guy to spend your money on, says the Atlanta Braves, and they're right, and they're 100% right. So Ender Inciarte in center field as well. You mean Mets fans who are listening to this podcast, you know what he did to you guys last year, and with that amazing catch in center field, he can also hit. And then Nick Markakis, he's a solid player, always kind of has been. And he was one of the constants that the Braves have had the last couple of seasons. And the other being, of course, Freddie Freeman. And so he had a really good year last year, and that's when the team started actually playing pretty well down the stretch. He was a big part of it. Julio Teheran, this is the rotation. Before I finished the offense, Julio Teheran, Bartolo Colon, Jaime Garcia, R.A. Dickey, Moke Foltynewicz. They bring in Dickey, Garcia, and Colon. All older players, all older pitchers, but they're savvy veterans. And we know what Dickey's been able to do in the National League East. We know what Bartolo's been able to do in the National League East. So they stay in the same division. They stay in the same area. And they're guys who can play with pitch well. Jaime Garcia is kind of in the same category. He's done well when he's able to stay healthy. And so they're 3 savvy veterans. And then you got Julio Teheran, a great young pitcher who really hasn't gotten the exposure because of how bad they've been in the last couple of years. And Mike Foltynewicz, who can all put it together this year and just be a massive strikeout machine. I would target Mike Foltynewicz in your fantasy drafts. That'd be a guy I'd look out for on this team. Back to the hitting real quick. Brandon Phillips, a solid get for them from the Cincinnati Reds to be their second baseman, an everyday second baseman. And I think that's a big get for them for the interim before Ozzie Albies comes up and takes his position. Catcher's a little weak. You bring in Kurt Suzuki. You have Tyler Flowers. It's not the greatest. Anthony Recker as well, the former Met. Adonis Garcia, third baseman. Those are your 2 probably weakest positions that you have with the Atlanta Braves. But it's enough there to produce enough offensive numbers, in my personal opinion. And the pitching is good enough, in my personal opinion, as well, to keep yourself in ball games with the bullpen that consists of Jim Johnson, who's kind of had a rebirth as a closer and done a good job there. And Aridis Vizcaíno at the back end of that bullpen is pretty darn good, too. So I do like what the Braves have done. That's why I have them in 3rd place after a 5th place finish last season. Here it gets to the interesting part. These are the 2 teams that are really going to be the competitors in the division. Not saying that the other teams can't make a surprise push, because I think that there's some pieces there, especially for the Braves, to make it that quote-unquote surprise push. It's the New York Mets and the Washington Nationals. And here it is. Ladies and gentlemen, my pick to come in 2nd place is actually going to be the Washington Nationals. And here's the reason why. And I know later in the podcast, you're going to be like, wait, what? He doesn't have money in the division, so why does he have him doing this? That's either a great tease for you or a terrible tease. But the Nationals, to me, seem to be like a team that doesn't always fare well in the regular season. And it kind of seems, I'm not going to say they're going to be bored, per se. But they seem like a team that might not necessarily be as dominant as they can be in the regular season. That's how I see this Washington Nationals team. And so while they're across the board, I love everything about them on their offensive side of the baseball, their defensive side of the baseball, whatever you want to call it, their rotation and in the deepness of that. Their bullpen's a little shaky, but man, I do like this team a lot. Let's start with the lineup. You have Trey Turner, who had a historic half of the season last year. It was, if you think Gary Sanchez was robbed of a Rookie of the Year award, and if we think in the NBA someone's going to get robbed of MVP award, Trey Turner, if it wasn't for what Corey Seager is, Trey Turner kind of got robbed last year of the NL Cy Young Award. But, Corey Seager definitely deserving of it. It's just Trey Turner's, man, just look up the numbers if you haven't been able to see Trey Turner's numbers from last season. So he's going to actually start playing shortstop after Espinosa's departure. And that's more of a comfortable position where he was at mostly in the minor leagues. So he comes up, he plays shortstop, and he's going to be able to lead off of that team with Daniel Murphy behind him and Bryce Harper, Adam Eaton maybe hitting second, and if not hitting second, hitting at the bottom of the order, getting on base there. Jason Worth, maybe he'll hit second with Ryan Zimmerman, Anthony Rendon, all these players. And then you bring in Matt Wieters. You're able to bring in Matt Wieters, but you end up acquiring Derek Norris. Oh, we got Matt Wieters. Okay, we get rid of Norris. So Wieters to me is kind of a... Wilson Ramos was really, really good last year. You can't take anything away from what the Buffalo did for them. But Matt Wieters, he's a very good player, and I think he's going to fit in very well as a switch hitter in the... It's kind of a cry. I'm blanking on what they call that series, but he moves from Baltimore, Maryland to Washington, D.C. with the Nationals. So the offense, I think, is going to be stellar this year. Stellar, for sure. Pitchers, you can't have a better top two. I think, they have a pretty good top two with Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg. And past that, I look at Gio Gonzalez and Tanner Roark as solid pitchers at the end of that rotation. And I think that Joe Ross is a guy who could break out and end up being their third guy and being the guy who starts game 3 of an NLDS or NLCS or something like that. So I really, really like what this Nationals team is looking like across that board. Let's get to the bullpen real quick. Sean Kelly, Blake Trinan, Coda Glover. I think Glover's going to get the closing position. But, Sammy Solis, Joe Blanton, they're guys that, they're not great, but I think they'll get the job done enough for them. And that's where maybe they're going to have to acquire someone. Last year they acquired Mark Melancon. I don't know who necessarily is out there this year, but they might have to go out and get someone to be their closer at the trade deadline and give up another young piece. They still have another young piece down there. As much as crazy as to believe what they traded to bring in Adam Eaton, they still have a nice outfield prospect there that they might be willing to part ways with. And so I look at Michael Taylor as a solid backup in the outfield. And so why do you have them in second place? You might be asking. I kind of covered it. I just don't know if this team is... I think this team is going to underachieve in the regular season. Put that thought on hold as we go to the first place team in the New York Mets. And the reason why I have the New York Mets is I think that their offense is going to improve this year because Jay Bruce can't be as bad as he was for the Mets in the second half last year when he was acquired from Cincinnati. And I think that this team is going to continue to improve offensively, especially if they start giving him every day more at-bats to Michael Conforto. If they give Conforto an opportunity, I think Conforto is ready to be an everyday, very solid contributor for this New York Mets team. The third base, I think Jose Reyes. The fact that they can have Jose Reyes to replace David Wright is very important because obviously Wright has a serious injury. We don't know what's going to happen with him, but Reyes being able to have the versatility and come in and play all over the place, that's important. Asdrubal Cabrera, actually very good for the Mets last year. Neil Walker and Lucas Duda now being healthy. And Wilmer Flores being a solid backup there as well. Travis d'Arnaud, I think, is going to put something together. He's going to get there, I think, at some point and have a pretty good offensive year. So I think their offense as a whole has really improved, and really nothing like how much has changed. Really not much. Really not much has changed on that offensive side. But I think that by improved, I mean that being getting healthy. I think that they can't. Like I said, Bruce can't do worse. If Bruce can get comfortable, I think the big thing with Jay Bruce is he wasn't able to get comfortable with the Mets last year. I think he's comfortable now. I think he can get comfortable with his team, and now that he gets comfortable, he'll get comfortable in the lineup. I know I said comfortable like 700 times. I'll say it one more time. The fact that he could be comfortable in this lineup is very important. Behind Cespedes, and as long as guys like Curtis Granderson can, I think that's the biggest part for me, is if Curtis Granderson can improve his on-base percentage at top of that lineup. or if they could get someone at the top of that lineup to really have a good on-base percentage, that's where this team will excel a lot. And really, how good does the offense really need to be if your rotation can stay healthy? And I know that's like the $1 million question with this Mets team, right? Is you've seen every single one of these pitchers have some kind of injury problem, and that's a real big issue, and it's really hard to see that with this New York Mets team. But I'm really confident that Noah Syndergaard and Jacob deGrom, Matt Harvey, Steven Matz, and Robert Gsellman could be a solid 5 rotation. Everyone knows there'll be a great rotation, one of the best in baseball, if not the best, if they all can stay healthy. And I'm confident that Syndergaard and deGrom will be. I have my doubts on Harvey, some heavy doubts on Matz, but I think that they'll all be fine enough. I think Harvey will get a lot. Will I guess for all intents and purposes, I think he'll be just as fine as deGrom and Syndergaard. Matz is the one that scares me the most at this point. I love Gsellman, and I think I like Lugo a lot. You know, Lugo, we see him got rocked up since spring training starts, but I think that was a big holdover over not having really competitive starts like he did for Puerto Rico, in the World Baseball Classic. So I think you get him in some high level situations more of the regular season when he thinks it counts. I think Lugo's gonna be a solid 6 starter. But they're going to need him a lot probably this year, giving some guys more rest down the stretch. Zach Wheeler, he's going to be another guy you can give an opportunity to, who he's looked okay in spring. While he's going to have an innings limit this year, I think he's, great there too. So with that rotation, I think that gives him more chances to win ball games and to not take as many days off as maybe the Nationals do. That's why I think the Mets will win the division. Real quick on that bullpen, Juris Familia will be Addison Reese to close while Familia gets the 15-game suspension, but he's solid at the back of the end of that bullpen. And the rest of the bullpen's okay. I like Salas. The best pitcher, actually, for the Mets in spring training, you want to know who it was? Rafael Montero. And while he could possibly fill in as a starter as well as as Wheeler and Lugo will, he could be really solid in that bullpen if they're using him as a long relief guy. And he could be trade bait if they need to go out and acquire something. But I really liked what Rafael Montero did in this spring training, and look for him to be a big part of that bullpen for the New York Mets. I like Michael Conforto for a fantasy sleeper. I really do, because I think eventually he might work his way into everyday playing time with the team. And I think he really should at this point. I don't know who to take out. You definitely don't take out Cespedes. You definitely don't take out Jay Bruce. So that all eyes point to Curtis Granderson, but it's hard to take out Granderson because he had a decent year last year. But I think you need a guy who needs to get on base. And if Granderson's not doing it at the top of the lineup, either find someone at the top of that lineup who can get on base, or maybe give Conforto a chance to be an on-base guy as well as a guy who can hit just for just as much power as Curtis Granderson. So that's the NL East preview for me. And as I promised before, I'm going to pick my wildcard teams in each league, and I'm going to give you my World Series prediction and my MVP and Cy Young Award predictions as well. So let's start with the National League. I already told you I think the Cubs will win their division, the Dodgers and Mets will win their division as well. My wild card obviously is as high as I'm on the Nationals. I got to put the Nationals there. And I got to pick the St. Louis Cardinals to make it. And it's really tough, man. There's a lot of good teams. I think the Giants are a good team. If you listen to the previous podcast on youtube.com/team1045, just look up the Sittin Sportside podcast. You'll see on the NL West preview that I'm really high on the Diamondbacks and what the Rockies can do this year. The Mets and Nationals were the only two teams I was really looking at in the NL East. In the NL Central, I think the Pirates also can make some noise along with the Cardinals, but I got to go with the Cardinals over the Pirates and the Giants, who will also make strong pushes. I think the Rockies and Diamondbacks will probably be in that race for a lot of the summer as well. In the American League playoffs, Indians, Astros, and Red Sox are all my division winners. I think that both wild cards, wait for it, are going to come out of the American League West. I have the Rangers and the Mariners in the big competition, the 3 big teams that are going to compete. Okay, I'll say 4. Yet again, the Blue Jays. Yet again, the Yankees. Yet again, the Royals and the Tigers. So those would be the teams. I think the Angels might figure their way in there for some part of the summer, but those are the teams I think look like competing. But I picked the Rangers and the Mariners to get out of it in the wild card. My World Series prediction, and this is where I kind of teased a little bit earlier. My World Series prediction actually is the Washington Nationals winning that wild card game, pitching Max Scherzer, probably against Carlos Martinez. We'll see. Obviously, we don't even know if Scherzer's going to be healthy at that point. Pitching against Max Scherzer. I have them winning it over the Houston Astros. who I think will get good performances from their pitchers. I think, and this will go hand in hand with my Cy Young Award prediction because I have Lance McCullers winning it in the American League from the Houston Astros. I just think he's going to have a big, he should strike out a lot of players. So think about a full 28 to 32 start season for him. He's got a new changeup added to his arsenal. If he can kind of perfect that, I think he has one of the best curveballs in all of baseball. And so I think that he puts it all together. That American League Cy Young is so wide open that if he has a full season, I love Lance McCullers. He's my prediction to win Cy Young. And speaking of one of the best curveballs in baseball, the best curveball in baseball probably belongs to Clayton Kershaw. It's definitely a favorite pick to pick, but Clayton Kershaw, he would have won it hands down in the National League last year if it wasn't for him getting injured. So if he continues that dominance this season, I had to pick him. Any year that you don't pick, it's kind of like any year you don't listen. I mean, I know it's a little bit different, but any year you don't pick like LeBron James to win it, it just doesn't make sense. But you can say the same, but I got to pick Kershaw for the end. And you can say the same thing about the AL MVP. Any year you don't pick Mike Trout, it doesn't make sense. Well, I didn't pick Mike Trout. I'm actually picking Mookie Betts. Here's the reason. I was very close to picking Francisco Lindor. I really was. Because a lot of it is best player on best team. So best record in the American League. And obviously I have him high on the Astros. I'm not sure. I think the wealth is going to be pretty high there. If I had to pick someone from the Astros, I would actually go with Jose Altuve. So I was close to going him. The three I was looking at was Altuve, Lindor, and Betts. But I think that the Red Sox offense is going to be so good. I think Betts' numbers are going to be better than the rest. And I got to go with Mookie Betts. I think the issue with that, right, is that he kind of got robbed last year in a way. Kind of like Mike Trout kind of got robbed in some seasons when Miguel Cabrera won it. Depending on what your perspective is, I kind of was one that thought Miguel Cabrera was worthy of it. But, you have other perspectives that thought Mike Trout got robbed there. You can make the argument that Mookie Betts got robbed last season. And so I think that this could be the year that he kind of gets, I don't know if the sympathy vote, but more of the, he probably should have won it last year. His numbers are just as good as last year and probably and worthy of it this year. So let's go with him. I think Mookie Betts will end up doing it and having another great season with one of the better offenses in the American League and the Red Sox. And he'll win the American League MVP, in my opinion. And I would say my National League MVP, I want to say he's one of the favorites, especially because he won it last year. I'm going back-to-back MVP awards for Chris Bryant. And this is tough because I think that Anthony Rizzo could be on that as well. The reason why I say that is, I don't know. I think if I had to pick, if I look at my other division winners, I look at the Dodgers and I look at the Mets. And then I look at the Nationals and I look at the Cardinals and Giants as well. I don't necessarily see a player kind of standing out from one of those teams. Maybe Corey Seager from the Dodgers. If Cespedes has a great year, you know what he said. If you look up his comments on the MVP award, I think he does want it. So if he could, I think Cespedes has a good enough year, he could possibly be in play for it. I just really think it's going to be Chris Bryant again. Best offense. He's going to put up the numbers. I think they might end up having. There's a good chance that they end up really differentiating themselves. The Cubs do. In the record category, and we know how that is played into the votes. So, although last year in the American League, Mike Trout ended up winning the award, even though Mookie Betts had one of the best teams in the American League, the best team in the American League record-wise, or second best team, excuse me, third best team. What am I saying? But still, one of the better records and won his division. He didn't get that tiebreaker over Trout, I know, but I think that could be what happens with Chris Bryant because of how good their differentiate the record is and how great his numbers are going to be again. So once again, I want to thank you for listening to the Sittin Sportside podcast. Not only this one, but all the previews that I have already up there. Like you said, you can find those on youtube.com/team.045. Once again, I'm Eric Hanneman, signing off for the last time. Make sure you listen to our other podcasts. I'll be joined by Mike James and John Longton in future podcasts talking about baseball, NBA playoffs, and whatnot. So keep your eye on those on youtube.com/team1045 and 1045theteam.com. So once again, I thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the division previews. Get at me on Twitter at EricH1045 if you don't like it. But I'm sure you'll be checking back to remind me in late September how wrong I was. We'll see you next time on the Sittin Sportside podcast.
Can't wait.